We've been talking with Richard Morrison, and we've been talking about how partisan bureaucrats weaponize financial regulation. And like the ultimate for them, their Death Star is central bank digital currency. If they get that enacted, they completely control everything. And we're going to talk solutions in this section. And our solution, just as a reminder for all our viewers, is state-based transactional gold and silver. We call it pirate money. You can learn more at piratemoneybook.com or transactionalgold.com. But with Richard, we've got to stop this. There's some government actions, there's some personal actions, some private actions. What do we do? Tell us about Jim Jordan and the select subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government, because I know you watch that closely.
Yeah, Jim Jordan, a Republican congressman from Ohio, is chairman of the Judiciary Committee, but he's also chairman of the committee. He created that select committee on the weaponization of the federal government. And, he and his committee members have been doing a great job exposing just that, instances where federal bureaucrats have been weaponizing their power to disadvantage and denude the civil rights of Americans. And so he's been looking at what happened with COVID policy and social media moderation, but also some things like this in terms of financial regulation. And so just like with Operation Choke Point under the Obama administration, it was members of Congress, mostly Republican members of Congress, who exposed that and held those bureaucrats, up to public view. So they couldn't pretend they weren't doing what they were really doing. And again, the reason why that kind of oversight, congressional oversight, is so important is because these aren't publicly announced initiatives, right? They're not constitutionally authorized things. They're not the normal work of those agencies. Again, like when we said at the very beginning of the show, that the job of those agencies is to stop force and fraud, not to force businesses and American citizens to transact one way or another. So because they're not publicly announced, you need the power of members of Congress to get to the truth, right? So we can sort of piece together a little bit of what is happening because people talk to each other, right? People in the same industry talk to each other, or you and I might see each other at a conference or an event and share some information. But you need the congressional staff and the congressional members and their authority to really bring these things to light and force government agents, the heads of government agencies, to answer their questions. Because if I ask them, they're probably not going to respond to me. And if almost anyone but a sitting member of Congress asks them, they're not going to respond. But when they get that subpoena to testify before, Congressman Jordan's committee, they almost have to respond. And not responding itself becomes a news story.
Yeah, and we've seen this at state level, too, where they've called in on ESG, like Brian Hughes called in BlackRock to come and testify in Texas. And, they don't like that scrutiny. How about the role of the courts? What role can courts play in protecting the rights of American citizens?
I think federal courts have an extremely important role to play in protecting the rights of American citizens in this area, where government agents are acting outside of their constitutional authority, outside of their legislative statutory authority, and are violating rights, like you said. We talked about First Amendment rights and Second Amendment rights too, because Second Amendment rights are often under attack in this area. We have actually recently some very good Supreme Court precedents, right? We have the case of West Virginia versus APA. It's from a couple of years ago that says federal agencies can't just invent new powers for themselves. They can't expand their authority without Congress giving them that ability. And then in the case of New York, there was a case of NRA versus Vullo, in which a state bureaucrat was trying to pressure all of the banks and financial institutions that did business with the National Rifle Association into closing down those business relationships. And the Supreme Court unanimously ruled just recently that that is absolutely not legitimate, and smacked down the state financial services director in New York State, saying that you can't use government pressure to accomplish something that would not be legal to do on your own. And that was specifically in the case of finance regulation and business relationships. So those two, and one more, one called Loper Bright, which sort of reversed the presumption in federal courts that federal courts would defer to the judgment of a federal agency. So that was what's the so-called Chevron doctrine of deference. Previously, federal courts would basically to split the difference, they would let the agency get the last word, and now Supreme Court has said no, trial court judges have to decide on the facts on their own without giving that deference to the government. So those are three, two very recent, one a couple years ago. Those three precedents are very strong, and I think we have just barely begun to test where that will take us in positive directions.
Yeah, I think the Jorkese case also with the SEC was another positive one where the SEC can't just come in and be, they were the fact finder, they were the judge, the jury, and then the executioner.